What if I told you that 3 of America's closest allies in the Middle East are secretly working together to destroy the United States military, and there is nothing Washington can do to stop it? Stick around, because what happened next will blow your mind. Right now, at this very moment, a geopolitical chess game is unfolding across the Middle East that most people completely misunderstand. The conventional narrative tells us this is a simple story of allies versus enemies, good versus evil, democracy versus tyranny. But what I am about to reveal to you tears that narrative apart and exposes a far more disturbing truth. The real war being waged in the Middle East is not the one you see on the news. It is a war of manipulation, deception, and strategic maneuvering, where America's so-called allies are actively working to ensure America loses. If you are captivated by the hidden forces shaping global power and want to understand what is really happening behind the headlines, smash that like button and let the world know you are paying attention. Every click helps expose the truth that mainstream media refuses to tell you. Now, to understand what is truly happening, we need to look at the 4 major players in this conflict. You have the United States, you have Israel, you have Saudi Arabia, and you have Iran. Most people assume these 4 nations fall neatly into 2 camps, America, Israel, and Saudi Arabia on one side, Iran on the other. But that assumption is catastrophically wrong. And by the end of this video, you will understand why the real alliances in the Middle East look nothing like what you have been told. Let me start with the easiest players to understand because their objectives are crystal clear. The United States has one overriding strategic goal in the Middle East: destroy Iran. Why? Because if you destroy Iran, the United States gains complete control over Middle Eastern oil. And more importantly, whoever controls Middle Eastern oil controls the Strait of Hormuz. And whoever controls the Strait of Hormuz controls global trade. This is not about democracy. This is not about human rights. This is about empire, pure and simple. Think about what flows through that narrow waterway every single day. Roughly 20% of the world's oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz. Tankers carrying crude from Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, and the United Arab Emirates all must navigate this choke point. If America controls both sides of that strait, it controls the economic lifeblood of Europe, Asia, and the developing world. That is leverage beyond measure. That is the kind of power that maintains empires. Now, Iran understands this perfectly, and Iran has developed its own strategic objectives in response. Control the Strait of Hormuz. Destroy CENTCOM, which is the American military command structure in the Middle East. And humble Israel. Those are the 3 pillars of Iranian strategy. Let me explain why each of these objectives matters. If Iran can control the Strait of Hormuz, suddenly every nation that depends on Middle Eastern oil has to negotiate with Tehran. Dubai, Oman, Bahrain, Kuwait, all of these wealthy Gulf states would suddenly find themselves paying tribute to Iran. The entire economic balance of the region shifts overnight. Iran becomes the new hegemon, the new power broker, the new bully of the Middle East. And destroying CENTCOM is not just about military victory. It is about removing the American presence from the region entirely. Central Command represents the projection of American power into the Middle East. It is the military infrastructure that allows Washington to intervene anywhere from Libya to Afghanistan. If you eliminate that infrastructure, America cannot fight effectively in the region anymore. It is like cutting the nerves that connect a brain to a body. The brain might still want to act, but the signals cannot reach the muscles. Now, why does Iran want to humble Israel rather than destroy it? This is where things get sophisticated. Iran knows that Israel possesses nuclear weapons. Push Israel too far, corner them completely, and those nuclear weapons might start flying. Nobody wants that. Not Iran, not the Arab states. Nobody. A nuclear exchange in the Middle East would devastate the entire region, including Iran itself. So the goal is not annihilation. The goal is humiliation. Weaken Israel enough that it can no longer project power across the region. Strip away its aura of invincibility. Make the other nations of the Middle East realize that Israel can be challenged, can be hurt, can be defeated in limited ways. But here's where the story takes its most disturbing turn. And I need you to pay very close attention because this is the part that changes everything you think you understand about this conflict. Israel's strategic objectives are not aligned with America's interests. In fact, they're in direct conflict. Most Americans assume that because Israel and the United States are allies, they share the same goals. They do not. Israel has its own agenda, its own ambitions, its own vision for what the Middle East should look like. And in that vision, America is not the dominant power. Israel is. Think about what Israel actually wants. Israel wants to destroy CENTCOM. Israel wants to destroy Iran. Israel wants to destroy the Gulf Cooperation Council, including Saudi Arabia. Why? Because if you eliminate all 3 of these power centers, Israel becomes the sole hegemon in the Middle East. There is no one left to challenge Israeli dominance. All the resources, all the strategic territory, all the influence flows to Jerusalem. This is sometimes called the Greater Israel Project. And while the details are hotly debated, the underlying logic is undeniable. Israel's long-term interests require weakening not just its enemies, but its allies as well. A strong America in the Middle East is a competitor for influence. A weakened America that has exhausted itself fighting endless wars is a partner that can be managed. And this brings us to the most chilling realization of all. Israel wants the United States to lose this war. Let me say that again because it is crucial to understanding everything that follows. Israel wants the United States to lose this war. Not quickly, not decisively, but slowly, painfully, in a grinding conflict that destroys America's political will to fight any more foreign wars. Think about what happens if America fights a long ground war in the Middle East and loses. American public opinion turns against foreign intervention. American politicians become terrified of military commitments abroad. American military power is stretched thin, demoralized, and degraded. And suddenly Israel is the only major military power left standing in the region. No American troops to compete with. No American diplomats pushing peace deals. Israel does not want. Just Israel, dominant and unchallenged. Now, you might be asking yourself, how could this possibly work? How could Israel manipulate America into a war that serves Israeli interests at America's expense? And the answer lies in understanding how wars are fought, not just with weapons, but with narratives, with politics, with the manipulation of public opinion. Stay with me here because we are about to uncover the mechanisms that make this manipulation possible. When any nation goes to war, it is not enough to have superior firepower. You have to worry about troop morale. Your soldiers have to believe they are fighting for a righteous cause. You have to worry about public opinion. The world needs to see you as the good guy, or at least the lesser evil. You have to worry about political will. Your population has to remain unified behind the war effort, even when the costs start mounting. And you have to worry about enemy morale. Push your opponent too hard, too fast, and they might do something desperate, something that escalates beyond your control. This is why nuclear weapons are actually a trap in this conflict. You might think that America or Israel could simply end any war by threatening nuclear annihilation. But that is not how modern warfare works. Nuclear weapons are weapons of last resort, not first strike. Use them too early and you lose all moral authority. You turn global opinion against you. You potentially trigger responses that spiral into catastrophe. This is why Israel will not use nuclear weapons in this conflict. Not because Israel lacks the capability, but because using them would end the war too quickly. And a quick war does not serve Israeli interests. Israel needs this conflict to drag on. Israel needs America to commit ground troops. Israel needs America to bleed. And here is the truly terrifying part. Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Israel, despite being enemies in every other context, all share one common interest. They all want to force the United States into a long ground war. They all want America to exhaust itself fighting in the Middle East. Iran wants this because a defeated America means Iranian hegemony. Saudi Arabia wants this because a weakened America means the Saudis can finally pursue their own regional ambitions without Washington looking over their shoulder. And Israel wants this because a broken America means Israeli dominance. Three enemies of convenience united by a single goal: destroy American military power in the Middle East. Now, you might be asking, why would America walk into this trap? Why would the most powerful military in human history allow itself to be manipulated into a war it cannot win? And the answer is devastatingly simple. America does not have a clear, coherent strategy. America is reactive, not proactive. America responds to events rather than shaping them. And that makes America easy to manipulate. Think about how wars start. They rarely begin with one side declaring its intentions openly. Wars begin with provocations, with incidents, with events that seem to demand a response. And each response draws you deeper into the conflict. Each escalation makes withdrawal harder. Each commitment creates new obligations that require further commitments. This is the escalation ladder that military strategists talk about. You start at the bottom with diplomatic pressure. Then you move to economic sanctions. Then limited military strikes. Then larger military operations. Then ground troops. Then occupation. And at each rung of the ladder, stepping back becomes politically impossible because you have already invested too much. You have already sent young men and women to die. You have already told your public that this war is necessary and righteous. How do you suddenly say you were wrong? Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Israel all understand this escalation dynamic perfectly. They know that if they can provoke America into taking the first few steps up that ladder, momentum will carry America the rest of the way. All they have to do is create the right incidents, manufacture the right crises, generate the right sense of urgency. And America, lacking a clear strategic vision, will react exactly as predicted. It will escalate, it will commit, it will fight, and it will lose. Now, I know this sounds like a conspiracy theory. I know it seems impossible that three nations supposedly at each other's throats could coordinate against a common enemy. But this is not about coordination in the sense of secret meetings and signed agreements. This is about converging interests. Each nation pursuing its own objectives, but those objectives happening to align in one crucial respect. Think of it like three hunters tracking the same prey from different directions. They do not need to communicate with each other. They do not need to share a plan. They simply need to keep driving the prey toward the same trap. And eventually, inevitably, the prey stumbles in. America is the prey, the Middle East is the trap, and the hunters are closing in. But wait, there is another layer to this story that most analysts completely overlook, and it has to do with the very foundation of American global power. To understand why America is so vulnerable to this trap, you need to understand something called the heartland theory. This is the geopolitical doctrine that has guided American military strategy for over a century. And understanding it will reveal exactly why America feels compelled to fight this war, even if victory is impossible. The heartland theory was developed by British geographer Halford Mackinder in the early 20th century, and it goes like this. The greatest threat to any maritime power is the unification of the Eurasian heartland. If the nations of Europe, Russia, the Middle East, and Asia ever come together into a single trading bloc, they can trade overland by rail and road. They no longer need to trade by sea. And if they no longer need to trade by sea, they no longer need the nations that control the sea lanes. America is fundamentally a maritime power. American dominance rests on controlling the world's oceans and the trade that flows across them. But if the heartland unifies, suddenly American naval power becomes irrelevant. Suddenly the nations of Eurasia can prosper without American protection or American permission. Suddenly the entire foundation of American empire crumbles. This is why America fought World War I and World War II. Not primarily to defeat Germany, but to prevent Germany from conquering Europe and Asia and creating a unified heartland. This is why America fought the Cold War. Not primarily to defeat communism, but to prevent the Soviet Union from unifying the heartland under a single political system. And this is why America is fighting in the Middle East today. Iran sits at the geographic center of the heartland. If Iran aligns with Russia and China, you suddenly have a massive bloc stretching from Moscow to Beijing. Europe, the Middle East, Africa, India, all of these regions will eventually be pulled into that orbit because trading with the heartland is easier and cheaper than trading with America. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and their growing list of partners represent exactly this threat. Right? They are building the infrastructure for heartland trade. They are developing alternatives to the American dollar. They're creating a world where American maritime power simply does not matter anymore. So America has no choice but to fight this war. Not because it wants to, not because it expects to win, but because the alternative is watching the entire foundation of American power dissolve. If Iran falls, the heartland fractures. Russia and China lose their crucial Middle Eastern partner. The land routes from Beijing to the Persian Gulf are disrupted, and America buys itself another generation of dominance. But here is the problem. Everyone else knows this too. Iran knows that America must try to destroy it. So Iran has prepared accordingly. 40 years of American sanctions have created an Iranian elite that has nothing to lose. Their wealth is not stored in American banks. Their children do not attend American universities. Their families do not own property in American cities. They cannot be bought off or intimidated like the elites of Venezuela or other nations where America has engineered regime change. The Venezuelan elite is fundamentally pro-American. When push comes to shove, they will negotiate with Washington to protect their investments and their families. But the Iranian elite has been cut off from the American system for decades. They have built their entire political and economic infrastructure around resistance to American power. Killing their leaders does not weaken this resistance. It strengthens it. Every drone strike, every assassination, every sanction becomes proof that America is the enemy that must be defeated. And so we arrive at the present moment. A moment of maximum danger, where all the forces we have discussed are converging toward a single outcome. America is being drawn into a ground war. It cannot win. Israel is encouraging this war because Israeli dominance requires American defeat. Iran is preparing for this war because Iranian survival requires American withdrawal. Saudi Arabia is positioning itself to benefit from this war regardless of the outcome. And the nations of the heartland are watching, waiting, preparing to fill the vacuum that American retreat will create. The question is no longer whether this war will happen. The question is how long it will last and how much destruction it will cause before it ends. And the most disturbing answer is that all the major players, except perhaps America itself, benefit from a long war. Israel wants a long war to exhaust America. Iran wants a long war to demonstrate that America can be resisted. Saudi Arabia wants a long war to weaken all its rivals simultaneously. And Russia and China want a long war to accelerate American decline and hasten the emergence of the multipolar world they have been building. Only America wants a quick victory, and quick victories in the Middle East do not exist. Ask anyone who remembers the promises that Iraq would be over in weeks. Ask anyone who remembers that Afghanistan was supposed to be a brief punitive expedition. Every American war in the Middle East begins with promises of swift triumph and ends in years of grinding attrition. This is the trap. And America is walking straight into it with eyes wide open but no idea how to escape. Now, some of you watching might be thinking that surely American strategists understand all of this, Surely the Pentagon has war-gamed these scenarios and developed countermeasures. Surely someone in Washington is working on a plan to avoid this catastrophic outcome. And you would be partially right. There are analysts in Washington who understand exactly what is happening. There are strategists who have written papers warning about precisely these dangers. But understanding a trap and avoiding a trap are two very different things. The problem is that American strategy is not made by strategists. It is made by politicians responding to short-term pressures, by donors demanding particular policies, by media cycles that reward confrontation over caution, by an entire political culture that has internalized the idea that America must always be dominant, always be active, always be leading. Retreat is politically impossible even when it is strategically necessary. Compromise is portrayed as weakness even when it would serve American interests. And so America lurches from crisis to crisis, reacting to provocations, escalating conflicts, deepening commitments, all while the trap closes tighter and tighter. The irony is that every American action intended to demonstrate strength actually reveals weakness. Every drone strike shows that America cannot occupy territory, only bomb it. Every sanction shows that America cannot persuade nations to cooperate, only coerce them. Every military deployment shows that America cannot achieve its objectives without perpetual warfare. And the nations of the world are watching. They are learning. They are adapting. They are preparing for the post-American world that is already emerging on the horizon. So, what happens next? What does the end game look like? There are several possibilities, and none of them are good for American power as currently constituted. In one scenario, America commits ground troops to Iran and becomes bogged down in an unwinnable insurgency for years or even decades. This is the Vietnam scenario, the Afghanistan scenario, playing out once again with even higher stakes. By the time America finally withdraws, its military is degraded, its public is demoralized, and its position in the world is permanently diminished. In another scenario, America attempts a limited military campaign using air power and special forces, but finds that it cannot achieve its objectives without ground troops. The escalation ladder draws America deeper and deeper into the conflict until it has no choice but to commit the forces it swore it would never send. This is the Iraq scenario, where mission creep transforms a limited intervention into a massive occupation. In a third scenario, America attempts to use nuclear weapons to force a quick victory, but finds that the use of nuclear weapons creates more problems than it solves. Global opinion turns against America. Allies distance themselves. The moral authority that underpins American leadership evaporates. And the nations of the world conclude that America has become a rogue state that must be contained rather than followed. In all three scenarios, the outcome is the same. American hegemony ends. The heartland unifies, and a new multipolar world emerges from the ashes of the American empire. The only question is how long this transition takes and how much suffering it causes along the way. Now, I want to be clear about something. I am not rooting for any particular outcome here. I am not celebrating American decline or cheering for its rivals. I am simply describing the strategic realities that shape this conflict, realities that most commentators either do not understand or choose not to discuss. The purpose of analysis is not to advocate for one side or another. The purpose is to see clearly, to understand deeply, and to prepare wisely for whatever comes next. And what comes next is likely to be turbulent, dangerous, and transformative for everyone on Earth. The alliances we have taken for granted are fracturing. The certainties we have built our world around are dissolving. The future is more uncertain than it has been in generations. But uncertainty is not the same as helplessness. Understanding the forces that shape our world is the first step toward navigating them successfully. And that is what we have begun to do today. We have pulled back the curtain on a conflict that most people misunderstand completely. We have exposed the hidden agendas that drive nations to war, even against their stated allies. We have revealed the strategic doctrines that make certain outcomes almost inevitable. And we have glimpsed the outlines of a world that is already being born in the fires of the Middle East. This is not the end of the story. This is barely the beginning. The forces we have discussed today will continue to unfold for years, perhaps decades to come. And understanding them will be essential for anyone who wants to make sense of the world they live in. So keep watching, keep questioning, keep seeking the truth behind the headlines. Because the more clearly you see the game being played, the better equipped you will be to survive and thrive in the world it creates. The Middle East is not just a region on a map. It is the crucible where the future of global power is being forged. And what happens there will determine the shape of the world your children and grandchildren inherit. Don't stop here. The world is full of hidden power games waiting to be exposed. Click on the next video and join us as we uncover even more of the strategic realities that mainstream media refuses to discuss.